Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Nick, and I help direct events here at the Strand. Before we launch into tonight's event with Melissa O'Shaughnessy and Gus Powell, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until after 93 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by third-generation owner Nancy Bass-Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, we wouldn't be here today. Tonight, we are excited to have with us photographer Melissa O'Shaughnessy. Melissa was born in 1960 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and studied at Georgetown University and the University of St. Thomas, graduating with a degree in journalism. She is now a New York City-based photographer. Her work has been featured in numerous exhibitions and publications, and her work is included in the book Bystander, A History of Street Photography. She is a member of UP Photographers, a collective of 27 international street photographers. Her first monograph, Perfect Strangers, New York City Street Photographs, launched just this month, published by Aperture. Joining Melissa in conversation tonight is fellow photographer and author Gus Powell. Gus was born in New York City in 1974. He is the author of The Company of Strangers, The Lonely Ones, Family Car Trouble, and Brooklyn Brief. His work has appeared in Aperture, The New Yorker, A Public Space, and Vogue. He is a member of the street photography collective UP, and on the MFA faculty of the School of Visual Arts in New York. He is represented by Sasha Wolf Projects, Lee Marks Fine Art, and Mika Mera. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Melissa O'Shaughnessy and Gus Powell to the stage. One moment while we get everyone unmuted here. And there we go.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Nick, for that introduction, and it's great to see you, Melissa.
Nice to see you too.
It's such a pleasure to be here. We've had a friendship that began about 4 years ago, and we first met in the room that I'm in right now. I'm at my studio in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I distinctly remember when you came was to be a part of this workshop that we did with Dirty Harry, who's another UP member, wonderful photographer from Crete. And I remember you arriving all in black, with perfect hair and your camera, and you immediately presented yourself with a level of seriousness about this work and with very bright, strong eyes. And in this time of getting to know you, first in that way, then us being colleagues on the streets of New York, flirting with similar corners that we both have had relationships with, and then seeing this body of work develop has been such a pleasure to see it happen across that time. Some of these pictures I think that are in the book come from before that time, and many come from across that time. So I think what the plan here now I think is for you to share some of that work, which isn't necessarily a reflection of the book edit, but more a demonstration of taking a walk with you and your way of seeing. So I'm going to hand it over to you, but we might still go back and forth a little bit as we look at these pictures.
Great. Yes, I've chosen 20 odd photos from the book, not sequenced in the way they are in the book. I didn't want to just flip through the book in this talk, but rather kind of pluck out a few things that I think are worth talking about, that are representative of the way I see and the things that attract me and the energy of the city that I've tried to communicate in this work. So Nick, if we can bring on the first slide. Beyond the cover. Next one. Thanks. She is my opener, and I think she sets a tone that is maybe a little different than many other street photographers might choose. She is a woman of a certain age and a certain elan that she's just irresistible. And I think she makes a really strong statement to open a book about New York, which often in my work often features women. And I think she's a really strong, confident, powerful older woman to set us off on our walk through the city. The next photo brings in another theme, and that is children, something that I do photograph children a lot, and I love the energy in this shot. It's the architecture of New York, but it's this tiny young girl flying through it. And I think by starting with these two pictures, I've said something about how I see, how I experience the city, and the energy and the variety of what's on offer in this great city of ours. Before COVID, this is a very before COVID book, so you're soon to see. So let's look at the next one. This is the corner of 8th and 42nd. It's beautiful in the afternoon. And the trick with street photography really is to get it not looking quite as chaotic as it is, but to convey that chaos. And I think this shot does this in such a nice way. Everyone in their own little pocket, but interrelated all the time, and moving through the city. Next one. She's my girl, and we knocked around the idea of calling the book Other Stories, but opted against naming a book after a retail store. But I love this woman because she's complex. She's a character in the city with the bus and the flag and the stores and the people. She's sexy, but she's also armored. Her clothing, she looks like she's wearing a armored breastplate in a way. She's very sexy, but she kind of puts you off in a way too. And so I think this is one way that I kind of see women. I see the complexity, not just that she's sexy, but what else is going on here with her and how she presents herself.
And Melissa, too, the thing that I so appreciate, so many of these pictures are built from the things that many street photographers embrace. But the way you approach them, the way you put them together, there's something different to that. And obviously in the way that you're talking about how you think about these human beings that you're paying attention to is a huge part of how these pictures are built and how you think about life in New York. And, I feel the connective tissue that happens for me so early in this too, though, which is kind of underneath it all, is the breeziness of things. Right from the beginning, there's little bits of hair that's flying, and the way that continues through the book. The other younger woman on the corner with all of that busyness behind it. I feel it's sort of the first introduction of this wind that then carries us through the book as we continue.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's look at the next one. This is my homage to where we are virtually right now. I live not too far from the Strand bookstore and walk by it. I photograph these outdoor books almost every day when I'm in the city. And this was a wet, rainy day, and there they were. And I'm very interested in mothers and daughters. I photograph them a lot. It's interesting to see, genes are such a wonderful thing, and to see that mirror gesture, that twinning that comes up in my work as well, at my favorite bookstore in the world. So this is a very, very special picture to me. I have 2 grown daughters, and I'm a book lover and a book buyer and a photographer. And to me, this is really, it's one of my favorites. Next, please. And then I carrying through the book is, again, this idea of twins and twinning. And Gus has asked me, what is it about the twinning? And I think maybe it started as young as me and my sister, who's just a couple years older. Like many children in many families, we were dressed alike for years. But it's also so visually interesting, and it's odd. It's a little bit tribal. Our family is our tribe. We're going to dress alike. It's not just that they're twins. It's that they're making a statement about family and togetherness and affinity. So it's both visually appealing and an interesting idea at the same time. Next, please. And this is the echo. These 2 pictures are on opposing pages in the book. And of course, this is the echo. These are not identical twins, but holy moly, that hair. And again, that feeling of energy and breeziness and womanhood, and this two incredible young women with this incredible hair. I mean, this is the meat of street photography and the generousness of Fifth Avenue in the city. Next, please. And it's not all women. There are birthday boys who maybe aren't so pleased with their birthday. Next. People buying birthday presents in a rush. I love this man. He is so harried. It is such a New York. I've got the gift. I'm on my way. I'm running late and I'm dashing through the crowds. And it just feels like New York and a busy city and all the things that we have going on in our private lives that we live out in public.
The schlepping, all the schlepping.
When we first got our apartment in New York, I quickly realized after living in the suburbs for so long that you can't buy more than you can carry. It was one of my early lessons as I shopped for Thanksgiving.
But it's such a part of New York life too, and city life. All these things that we carry, and each one of those things becomes a part of the narrative, right? You know, and even the way I feel like some of the women, the way they're holding their cell phone is different than the way somebody else holds their phone, and what their phone looks like. If you're holding flowers, that means one thing. If you're holding a birthday box, that means another thing. And each one allows us to think a little bit about the inciting incidents in this person's life. You know, just that little gift of knowing it's a birthday problem that he seems to be trying to solve. It adds something.
Yeah. Great. Next, please. And this is a picture that kind of gels everything I try to do in a good and interesting picture that I enjoy. There's 4 or 5 stories going at once. People are battling the breeze. It's a really good corner in New York at 42nd and 5th. We've got the old man who just kind of, you could tell he hobbled over to sit on that fire hydrant. And his friends saw him and they have a nice moment together. And we're holding our hair in the wind. It's got so many stories in one place. This is what I try to do. This is the kind of picture I'm shooting for. Don't always get them.
And Melissa, when we've talked a little bit, in the lead up to this about our different practices and how we approach, picture making, and the sort of the 2 real firm modalities being fishing versus following, moving as opposed to working a place. And I think that I think we all deploy those different strategies at different times. But where is your happy place in that process? Is it more being on the move, or is it, here you have a situation where you have this guy who's living there in that conversation, so you can build a picture on top of that. The wind is offering something for you. But how do you work the space when you're out there?
This corner I plant myself when I know it's going to be busy. But I move around within it. I don't frame the shot to be very specific. I'm reacting to the way people are moving. Generally, I'm on the move. I'm not terribly patient. I don't stake out locations. I mean, they reveal themselves over time, but I'm not patient enough to stay for days or keep going back again and again to try to frame an exact thing. I like the feeling of energy in a shot, and so I find that if I'm physically propelling myself forward, I'm getting more energy in my pictures. Next, please. And the wind, it's not just the women having their hair blown, it's men in camel coats, which is such an homage to a mentor of both Gus and mine. But I'm not so good, I only got one. But this is in Soho, and again, it's a good corner. I think a lot of street photographers recognize it at Prince and Broadway. But yeah, we're battling against the city and nature at the same time, and here's the collision of everyone in one frame, living different lives, but I get to put them together. Next, please. I guess I put quite a few windy ones in because it is a theme that runs through the book, and I think it gives it, energy on a still picture. To give a still picture a sense of movement and energy, wind is your friend. Next. Downtown. And, you know, the architecture of this city was important for me to include. You know, I could have brought this in and cropped it and made it just about her, but it's not just about her. It's about a quiet moment in a huge city. And of course, this is the part of the city that was so ravaged by 9/11. And these buildings have all been, you know, repaired and polished up. And it's kind of a rebirth too. Next, please. And I have a funny section because the city can be a funny place. And we know about this every sort of protest that can be found in the city. And this one was, of course, to fuck fur. And of course, the shot isn't so much his coat, but is the sad dog who is relating to the coat, the furry dog. So this is my little section where you know, we have to remember that there's so much to be found that makes us smile. Next. And you have to have a good dog in a New York street photography book. And I love, you know, I'm a dog person. This is the most human looking dog I think I've ever seen, sitting in that black car on a rainy day. He's being ferried around like a prince.
I don't even like dogs or cats particularly, but I always tell my students or anyone who's working on a portfolio of any kind, there has to be at least one cat or one dog in it.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, any portfolio review, people will be looking through it so quickly, but they'll come to that dog or their cat and someone will go, oh, and then they stop and they slow down. It's just so accessible and it's so there that even if you don't like them, you have a dialogue with them. And of course, it's wonderful having this look happening out to you and the way it doesn't echo on that other dog that was so miserable, you know, at the demonstration.
Right. Next. And kind of keeping with the fuck fur theme, you know, she's marvelous. She's one of the few people in the book who's spotted me directly. But she's not displeased with me. She realizes she's got a look and she's rocking it. And you want her to be your grandmother. Teeth or no teeth. No, she's wonderful. But she's noticed me. So there's a little moment of what I think is a very nice connection there. Next, please. And again, the mothers, the daughters, the genetic inheritance, which is really something. I took the picture noticing the little girls, of course, and didn't see the mother's expression until I looked at the picture on my computer. And of course, it makes the picture. And I'm sure they were probably having a perfectly good time, but not at this fraction of a second.
But there's so many gifts too, though. I mean, just the nature of the fashion too. Do you know what I mean? That they're in these black and white dots, and then her wearing this black dress that has this bow tied in the middle of it. It's all a part of the picture. Yeah,
yeah. And again, it's how we present ourselves to the world. You know, what kind of little party have they been to or are they going to? They're so carefully put together, and the mother has given such care. Again, they don't look like identical twins. They could be twins, but you know, our mothers, if they have two girls, dress us alike no matter what we do. You know, it really is. Next, please. This picture is interesting. People love it, and I always get a little uneasy because I think it's a picture that's typical of kind of the Instagram trope. Of, you know, a strong graphic part of the city and the bright color and the straight lines and a human being in it. So part of me resisted a little, but the other part of me, it's the part where you look at the picture and you realize he's the everyman. He's a businessman. It looks like he's schlepping a couple bags, but it's that the architect designed that window for a man of exactly that height. I mean, if I went through that door, you'd get my eyebrows. If Gus went through that door, you'd get, what, his camera? You know, maybe. But that this man is an everyman. And so it's kind of a wonderful thing about the picture that he's the man, he's the person that the architects had in mind.
For me, too, one of my favorite films of all time is Jacques Tati's Playtime. And for me, this picture does that. This absurd kind of modernist space, but there's still humanity trying to live within this larger infrastructure that has all these design constructs and aspirations, but there's still life behind it all somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a picture that I think makes people smile, and these days that's a really good thing. Next, please. And this is down in Chinatown. Again, it's a little absurd. I don't know what's going on here. There wasn't a photographer. It looks like she could be a model, but it's kind of, things like this happen in the city. And when you happen to be standing in the spot where the people come together in their different lives with their heading in different directions, I don't know what she's doing, but it makes you think. I can't explain it, but it's a nice city moment down in Chinatown. Next, please. Next, Nick. And, a book should also be of its time. And, we've all seen this for a while. You saw nothing but this in street photography. I debated to include it, but the vapors are it's of our time. It does place the book in time, which was also important to me. And, a candy cane and the dragon, and the guard. It's a famous corner in New York City with that blank wall at 57th and 5th. And he's in his own world of smoke. And I think we are, so many people are alone in their heads in this busy city that I think it's a nice moment. Next.
It's hard not to have this intersection in a body of work too, because from New York, that's in this genre. I mean, I feel that anybody who's ever tried to make street photography in New York has put in some solid time at this intersection at 57th and 5th, And to see, and I think that you're right to say it should be of its time, because this is of its time, but it's still this location that is one of the heart chakras of all street photography. So to not include it would somehow, you would notice its absence in some way. And of course, you would have to spend time at least working it in the process of making a body of work like this as well.
Right. Next, please. And this, again, Fifth Avenue, again, this connects to the picture before it. I think it's close in the book as well. So you have that echo of the smoke and the Fifth Avenue life. But it's iconic. These food stands are so iconic in New York. And it's nice, again, to place that, to bring in references that are so specific to New York City. And the cold winter, but people still mobbed on Fifth Avenue as cold as it obviously is. So it's iconic, but it's backlit and a little fresh. And this one, unlike many of the pictures of the book, isn't about a specific set of people, of individuals. It's much more a scene.
And sensory too, for me. It's, you can't not smell that smoke and the hot dogs and what is the plasma of life in public space in New York too.
Yeah, good. Next, please. And down in Chinatown, back to my families, my mother's and children, and shopping and on the move. But deep within, a lot of my women in this book are kind of deep within themselves as they navigate this outward maze that is the city and living the life and grocery shopping. So I love these plastic people coming through these plastic doors, but it's hard to get it just so. And I love this picture. It has feeling to me. And that's important. That's important too, to get a sense of people's spirit and soul in a picture. Next, please. And this is my closing. This is how I close the book. I think she's a beautiful bookend to our old lady at the beginning, with that same care in how they present themselves to the world. And she's wearing she's wearing a coat that's covered with women, with stylized drawings of women. And it feels, she's got that little hint of a hump that age brings on to women. And it feels like she's beautifully carrying, women on her back. And I thought it was a good place to close it as a bookend to the other one. So that's it. That's a that's my selection that we're going to look at for now. And you can see how they all play out in the larger story of the book.
Thank you for that, Melissa.
There we are.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about and to think about a little bit is maybe first to talk a little bit about that process of moving from making individual pictures, because I think all of us who embrace this practice, at first you go out making singular photographs.
Absolutely.
And often trying to maybe replicate the photographs and the photographers you admire. And you come up with strategies to do that. And so first you learn how to play their songs in your moment in time. And then you get some success with that. And then as you evolve, something new happens where you start finding your own voice. And then the next big step, in my opinion, is doing what you've accomplished here, which is creating a body of work and then collaborating with others to put that into a book form.
Right.
Which for me is very specific, because you are now the author of this body of work. And the fact that you have a journalist background, that's not necessarily what this is about. You know, of course, this is connected to New York at this time. But the one thing that for me that is continuous throughout it is your presence. You're there. Any monograph of street photography of the genre, in my opinion, is to a degree a memoir of that author's experience. And the work that is strongest is imbibed with that quality of authorship. You know, and of course, the canon of these different books, there's many different voices and languages and approaches, and each one is reflective of those authors in different ways. And one thing I'm interested is how you might think of, first of all, maybe talk about your process of that moment when you understood it as a body of work and what you felt was the connective tissue. And then two, really importantly, is talking about this as the body of work that you are the author of, the person you are, a woman in this time, in this city, and that these are pictures that only you could make. And even though they're built from the things that many street photographers work from, they're reflective of you and your unique vision.
Sure.
And so I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think, again, like you said, it always starts from those first individual pictures. And it takes a while. It took me a long time to start building up the courage to be very close to people and to catch those moments. So it was a very slow progression into the first dozen or so pictures that I thought were good. And then you look at those pictures and you say, okay, what am I starting to see, and what story am I starting to tell? And it reveals itself to you. I can't go out with a plan and say, well, today I'm going to find some twins and an old lady and the wind's going to be blowing. It has nothing to do with it. It comes from, oh, I'm responding to families. Oh, I'm responding to women and children. I'm responding to men who are engaged, you know, in a way that's not just business or a briefcase. You know, how are they living their lives on the street? So then you have some of your building blocks to say, okay, I'm building on this, and then it starts to reveal your own self. And I started to realize, well, you know, I'm a woman in this genre that has been long, you know, been the bailiwick of men. I think I want to get into that. I think women have always done it, but it's been more well trodden by men. So what can I add as a mother and a wife and a daughter and a grandmother? How do I see the world that's different from a man who maybe is childless and young, or an older, you know, how is my experience as a woman going to help me make something new of the street, which is what New York has been so photographed. So it started to reveal itself to me through these themes that I wasn't aware of until the pictures started to accumulate. And then it becomes, how do I tell you about how much I love this city? That I'm not a native New Yorker. My father was, and so as a little girl, you know, going to New York was magic. So that's in there somewhere, that I have this really kind of childlike affection for this place. And it builds from there. And then the wind comes in. It's like, ooh, you know, the wind is giving the pictures energy and color and very attractive. You'll notice that the book is really quite, for a city that's really gray so much of the time.
Especially today.
Yeah. It's a very colorful book. And so that obviously appeals to me. So while you're learning how to do this, you're learning about yourself, and you're learning about how you can tell your story, how you can look at people and say, this experience of rushing with the birthday gift is a universal thing, but it's also, I hope you also see my affection for that man, for people who who are wonderful in their variety and their stress and their happiness and their childhood misery. And it's the theater of life. And I think because I'm older, because I have grandchildren, because I've raised 3 children, I bring a maturity and a certain delight and a certain femininity to this body of work.
And I also think a certain type of strength too, which is, in my opinion, a feminine strength different than a masculine strength. Yeah. It's there, and it's there in these women, the way they're observed. Some of these exact same human beings photographed by somebody else would be seen and portrayed in a very different way. And the subtle differences of that would be there. They'd be felt.
And it's so hard to describe it and explain it to someone who isn't out doing what we do on the street. I mean, I think a lot of people here probably do understand very well that you're operating in a 500th of a second. And you have to kind of go home and say, why was it that 500? You get better, you get quick, you understand your camera, like what it's going to happen, and you're studying human nature, so you can sometimes anticipate things. But, why did I press that button at that fraction of a second? And you have to go inside to examine that.
Absolutely. And also, for me, it's too, I mean, my obsession is, I always talk about the plasma of life in the city, and right. I'm obsessed with trying to take 7 people and put them into a relationship that doesn't exist. They just happen to be in that time and space, but then to try and make a photograph that speaks about them all being in this sort of micro relationship for a moment. And of course, again, I'm there as well, and whoever is there, when you go into a space, you're participating with it in a different way, and it's participating with you in a unique way. Mm-hmm. And for each person, whether you have a camera or not. And I think that the way that informs the types of pictures you make. And also, I think that the themes that you're talking about and the way that you presented that in the edit of the book, for me, I get really obsessed with how, as you should, any book begins. So to set a certain sort of pace right from the beginning. You obviously have your heroine on the cover, but going with those first 2 pictures, one being this older woman with this fantastic look and this great pose, but she's looking out of the frame. And then right afterwards, going to that young girl dancing. And for me to have that leap of these 2 generations that are separated. But I sense, for me, there is some of this idea of a female gaze that's there. Mm-hmm. Yours, but also that woman as well, looking at the city. And the way that, what's her hierarchy? What's any photographer artist's hierarchy in terms of what are the lives that are being lived in front of me? What are the problems that I'm wrestling with? What am I thinking about? And right. All of that informs the types of pictures you make, what that 500th of a second is, and each one of those 500 slots in a second is a little bit different.
Yes, they are. And I don't do rapid fire. I mean, it is that, maybe I'll take 3 or 4 shots, but usually you train yourself to know what's coming, to respond to the moment. And it is the whole subject of a female gaze versus a male gaze is, we talked about this earlier, that we were going to tiptoe into it because it's something we're never going to pin down. I certainly think as a fairly petite woman, I always dress in black. I hang my camera. I had a friend run into me and said, "My God, you look just like a tourist." And it's very considered on my part. But I think I can take pictures of children. I can get close to families and not get in trouble. And I know a lot of men just won't go there in the city anymore because people have become very sensitive about it. So physically, I'm able to do things that some men can't. And then you get, okay, so now physically you're safer photographing young children or women or families because you're not in some way a threat. But then, what is more intellectually, what is the female gaze? What am I attracted to? I'm not sexually attracted to these beautiful women, but I'm obviously attracted to them and how they present themselves and their youth or their age is interesting to me.
Well, you talked about energy a lot too, right? And I think that's, you feel the energy of these human beings, right? And I even think, and I love, we've talked a little bit about uniforms. I mean, I have my uniform too. I pretend to be a Dutch tourist, that's my gag, right?
Right.
And even just a balance of, and I think everybody who photographs in the street, I had an uncle who was, he was a Marine, and then worked in the government his whole life. But even after he left the Marines, long after, he kept that buzz cut. And I remember asking him, I said, Uncle Robert, why do you have a buzz cut? And he just said, there's a uniform for every parade. And just this idea that the life on the street is a parade, and we're each showing up for it every day. And whether we spend 2 hours on the decisions that we make on what to wear or 2 minutes, we all steal up in some kind of way to present ourselves and to show ourselves to others, or just to prepare ourselves for that. Right. And I think, I know you have your look, and that's a part of it, and I always see you in it. But I also think it's a part of, this body of work also, that is a theme.
Yeah. And really, I mean, if you were to take a broader look at really what's going on in the city, people dress really sloppy, a lot of t-shirts, a lot of, that it's, you look, back at books from 30, 40 years ago, and people dressed much more carefully than they do now. People are really sloppy, and there's not a lot of sloppy in my book. It's interesting. I am obviously attracted to people who have taken the care to present themselves. New York's a fashionable city, and it's an international city. So it's not like everyone's schlubbing around in sweatpants, but it's changed a lot. And I guess maybe there's something I'm attracted to those people who take that little bit of extra time to present a self to the world. It's
in every picture of yours, I feel like. That older woman who has no teeth, that she's right there. She's just as dignified as the rest, and made her set of decisions about how to present herself, right, and to step out.
But I want to, once you see, whether it be armor or care with presentation, I also want you to see the individuality of people, because I'm really reverent of people. I feel that I'm making my art out of somebody else. And so it's important to me to then treat those people in my pictures with dignity and respect and affection. And that's how the book title grew. Because, I started out with, there's a G.K. Chesterton quote that has splendid strangers in it. And we thought, it's a little too British. It's a New York book. Maybe it's a little twee. Splendid's a little old fashioned. This is a book of the times. And so we kind of kept throwing words around, and it came to perfect strangers. And I love the double meaning of that, because these people are all perfect strangers. I've had one identified already. But they're perfect, they're perfect strangers. So that's how the title came. Anyone who's tried to title a book knows how long that can take.
Yeah, the title of my first book is The Company of Strangers.
Yeah. And I was well aware of that. I thought,
But before, it almost was titled In the Middle of the City. And so all the boxes that came from Korea, they still put that title on all the boxes.
I didn't know
of like, it's this little throwback, In the Middle of the City, but it sounded like such a mouthful that we changed it because things change. But I love that there's that little footnote.
Yeah, that's great. I never knew that. Yeah, no, it's tough. And there's so many New York street photography books, and how do you differentiate it? And so I ran with the feminine in this. And it's not a book only of women. There's a lot of men and different situations, but
on that note too, I feel like there's again, once you have the ambitions, first you start making pictures like this that are just for yourself. Then you start sharing them. Then you do what you've done, which is compile them into an actual book that's cohesive, right, and has a set of ideas and ambitions behind it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that next step, is so important, but it also is about audience, right? Right. And to that end, and a book like this has the ability, as your publishers or anyone is aware, that it can speak to someone who's interested in New York. Mm-hmm. It can speak to someone who's interested in this style of photography. Mm-hmm. But one question I might have for you in terms of thinking about audience, what are some of the takeaways that you would want your audience to get from this body of work?
Well, I think, I hope it's sets up a time. I hope the book is placed squarely in a certain time. I think that COVID helped do that to this body of work. I mean, in the flow of time, the book was, the bulk of the book is five years of work. So I wanted to place it in this time, because I think that that's one of the things that makes street photography really interesting. It's not, I think people aren't in the art world, they're not so interested in contemporary street photography, but the minute it has a patina of age or is set in a particular time and place, it becomes really interesting. I mean, you look back and you think, oh, look at how people used to be and dress and interact. I mean, the cell phone is the great bane of our existence. But in terms of audience, I think that's a really hard question. I've made this work. Here's me, but here's the city, and here are human beings that I find endlessly fascinating. So I hope that the takeaway is a real reverence. I'm always reminded of a friend of mine years ago was on a plane, and she was wedged somewhere deep in the bowels of the plane in the middle seat in a long flight. And this man got on and he sat next to her and he started, squirming around. And she just thought, oh, this is going to be the longest flight of my life. And he turned to her and he said, I'm so sorry. My leg is really bothering me. Do you mind if I take it off? And, he had a prosthetic leg and it was hurting him. And he was in a small seat too. And she said instantly her whole attitude changed. And I carry that story with me because it's about, you don't know what other people are going through. If you photograph them and they don't want to be photographed, delete the photograph if you're shooting digitally. It's about, for me, it's about reverence. Let's look at our fellow humans with affection and delight and joy and see the energy in the world that is to be celebrated and the city that is to be celebrated. And COVID put brackets around it. So instantly it's been put in a time, I think for many years, more people are going to be masked. Even if COVID's over and we have a cold, we'll understand, well, don't give another person a cold. Or will we mask in such close proximity without a second thought? I think COVID has changed our world.
I completely agree with you. And also, some of the words that you use, you talk about the energy, you talk about affinity and reverence. And I think all of that is there in this work. Mm-hmm. It's there for the individuals, but for me, it's also there for the act of being a New Yorker and walking through that space, you know what I mean? And the shared experience that I think most of us who do this work, to some degree, we are traditional extroverts in the sense that we get energy from being in that experience. Mm-hmm. It inspires. And with me, literally, I will be depleted and then I'll go into a crowded street and I wake up, you feel it. And, and I think you're completely right. It's both the sadness and the gift of this body of work being from this moment of time. It captures that experience pre-COVID with great clarity and with reverence and with dignity. And it also, the thing that I'm struggling with now in terms of bearing witness to the city, it's one of the things you love about New York is when you arrive in it, there's this sense of urgency and this hustle. You believe that everybody has a trajectory that they're trying to get to, whether that they're trying to get to the birthday party or they're just trying to get to the candy store. I don't know, but there's that energy, and that vitality that's a part of the city, which is now not there, right? I've gone out to try and shoot it sometimes, and it's just, I've never seen New Yorkers move so slow before. I mean, literally, just like, I don't know what, and they're not tourists, so we also can't be tourists. So even the way that we inhabit space is different. We can't pretend to be tourists. That people look at you a little differently if you're out with a camera.
I feel, I've always felt very protected in a crowd. And when I first went out, my first forays back into the city when it was lifting and people were out a little bit more, I didn't feel so, I'm a little woman. I didn't feel so, I've never felt unsafe, but I started to feel less protected by the physical crowds around me. I mean, I can hide in a crowd. I really can. So it really is of a time, and I hope it's of a perspective that's a little fresh in street photography. I mean, there are a lot of women street photographers, and I think, it's something we battled with even in the publicity press for the book. They wanted to say of one of only a few women street photographers. There are a lot of women working in the street, but they're not always recognized, or they don't push themselves forward as much as men might be inclined to do. I mean, I think the Instagram's changing that. Some great women's groups, Gulnara Samoilova with women street photographers and the Women in Street on Facebook. I mean, these groups have grown up and given women much more of a voice, which I think is really great. But
as does this book too, in my opinion, because it doesn't, we've talked about the gender issues around the work and around the practice of street photography. And I go to that first time I met you, that workshop, I think we had 12 people in it. But you were the one. You were the only lady in the room. You know what I mean? But the gift of this book to me, and even though we've talked a lot about the female gaze, that's not what it's about. But of course, it's also what it's about. The same way all these other books that are not about the male gaze, it's also about the male gaze. It's because that's inscribed into the work. Those are who made these images. It's your experience in life. I haven't ever been a man, and I don't know what it feels like to be a man, and vice versa. And so, you go out and you respond in the way that your own life has taught you to respond. And then you go one step further and you say, I don't want to be known as a female street photographer only, any more than you want to be known as, oh, he's a male street photographer. You want the work to take a step beyond that and stand on its own merits beyond gender, because we're putting everyone in their slots too much these days and identifying too much with one thing. But mine relates in many ways to my experience and my age and my time. It's the only way the work could be authentic.
Yeah.
Is if it had those abilities. And that's true for any type of artist of any gender or any race or ethnicity. It has to be authentic to your experience. Otherwise, you sense it, that the work just doesn't have the same legs to stand on, and that's what brings us in. Missy, how do you feel about taking some questions at this point?
I'd love to. It'd be great. I'm going to have to put on my glasses if I'm going to have to read them.
I think Nick is going to return to assist us.
Oh, great.
You would be correct. Hi, everyone. Before we launch into questions, I just wanted to address something to those watching at home. If for whatever, at any point you had technical issues with the video, this is a photography event, so the quality of the images is very important. We apologize if you did have any problems. You can use the same link and password after the event concludes to access the recording. And so the recording should have the highest fidelity, playback. So you can go back and see the images as many times as you want. So just be aware of that. So yes, why don't we take some questions? Okay, so here we go. This is from, let me see. Oh, it is not listed who this is from, but I'll read it anyway. How do you deal with the inevitable people who get angry about being photographed? You mentioned deleting photos of people who don't want to be photographed, for example, but is there another layer to that?
Who's this? Is this to me or Gus or both?
This is to, it can be to both of you.
Yeah.
I think for you, Melissa.
I think we can each give a quick answer.
Yeah.
I'm usually not noticed. I try not, sometimes people walk by and say, did she just take my picture? So many people have cameras. So many people have cell phones. New York is a great place to work because most people just don't object. I can count on one hand the times people have gotten angry with me, and I've said I'll delete the picture, because then the picture isn't happy. It's not a good picture for me. If they really didn't want to be photographed and they noticed me and they had some, again, back to the man with the prosthetic leg. If they're having a bad day and don't want me to photograph them, I respect that. So I rarely, and again, my size, my age, my gender, and I'm really quick and I dress like a tourist, and just people don't think I'm serious. And I've cultivated that. I'm not, artiste, on the street. I look like a tourist, middle-aged tourist. I'm a target for the handbag sellers on Canal Street. So. Gus, how about you? What have you done to?
For me, I really have not. In my 20 years of experience, there's very few times that I've had issues, and part it's because of the content and the types of people that I'm relating to. I'm almost always embracing something that I have an affection for in some capacity, whether it's a human being struggling to move something down the street, or whether it's a piece of paper blowing in the wind. There's this inherent affection that I usually enthusiasm for it, which I think Melissa shares as well. And often I use that enthusiasm. And if you project that at your core, people see that in you. So for the most part, and then I also have my tricks too, similar to being a tourist. There's ways of photographing one thing, but then sort of using your body language in a way to make them think that you're looking or working on somebody else. You sense that they're looking at you, and then so you take the camera away and you look at the person behind them, and then they look at the person behind them, and then you leave.
Yeah.
And then nobody's the worse for it, But if I sense that something's not going to go well, I rarely then have the ambition to force it and make that happen. That's just not who I am. Other photographers can do that in spades and do it very effectively, but it's just not a part of my practice. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah, probably a prudent way of photographing. Here's an interesting one, Melissa. What was the greatest difficulty for you in making this book?
And making the book.
Correct.
The sequence went through so many iterations. I started on my own. I worked with an editor that I hired to help me make some sense of it, and then I worked with the brilliant Denise Wolfe at Aperture, and I had advice along the way. It was getting that story to flow. To feel very unforced and natural, to have surprises along the way, to not overwork a theme, to kill your darlings, take out the pictures that are wonderful, but you don't need it. It's getting that storyline, that sequence to flow in a way that feels natural and unforced. And that was the hardest thing. And I'm sure, I haven't quite gone there yet, because I'm still kind of thrilled to have my early copy, but I'm sure a month or two from now, I'll be like, oh, that one shouldn't have gone in, or why did I do that? So it's never done. It's never done. But that was the hardest.
And that's why you do another book.
Right.
You have to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Speaking of, that's a natural jump off point. What is next for you? And this can be a question for the both of you.
Why don't you take that one first, Gus?
It's I finished a book last year that was not street photography. It was called Family Car Trouble, and it was very much a memoir of my family life, about the arrival of my children and the death of my father, and then a difficult. Oh, there it is. Look at the product placement. Thank you.
Yes.
It's a difficult to maintain car. So it was really about a body of work about intimate family life, and I've thought about it and talked about it a lot since lockdown and the coronavirus, because so many people have been forced into that type of quarantine experience of looking at family life. Since I just completed that content has been less interesting for me. And at the same time, I'm trying to find ways to study life in public again. And the thing that I'm thinking about a lot is really about human adaptation, and to see how this plasma that I think about all the time. And I also feel, to some degree, I feel like I've been photographing versions of social distancing for my entire career. I've always been interested in the distance between strangers and how there's a charge there. So the thing that I'm trying to pay attention to now and to work with is looking at how that we as humans, as citizens of New York in particular, but all over, particularly in urban spaces, how we find a way to reconnect in public space so that we feel like neighbors and cohorts again, rather than things that might infect one another. Because for me, that's been the greatest part of life in New York, and something that's reflective in Melissa's book as well, is that these individuals, but there's a collective energy there that's part of it, and a belief that you have an affinity with one another. You know, and this was always a great lesson of 9/11, that we felt like that's when the New Yorkers really showed their face and showed what they're made of and how we relate to each other and how we have each other's backs. And I'm interested to see how we can manage that moving forward. So we'll see what happens. You know, not many pictures have been made, but I'm thinking about it and trying to figure out how to do that next.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm more often than not out in the suburbs during COVID. I have a very elderly mother who I can't afford to be exposing myself and thereby exposing her. So I've been doing some kind of quirky landscapes. I'm on long walks in the woods. I've never been a person who's attracted to a lot of landscape photography, but you make of it what you will. I need to have a camera, and somehow walking with a camera, no matter where you are, makes you more present in your life. So if I go with the podcast and no camera, I'm just not paying attention. The minute you have a camera, the weather, the air, you're breathing, your pleasure in the world is enhanced. So maybe you'll get a landscape book out of me. I don't know. But I'm getting into the city too. And like Gus, trying to make sense is, how do I represent in a very tender and human way, people who are masked. I mean, it's just mask. We're supposed to be masked, but so much of what I respond to is hidden. So it's a challenge. So we'll see. I think we're all kind of in this purgatory.
I just imagine seeing a very breezy landscape project.
I'm from Minnesota. I stomp out in the snow and all weather. So I may have to wait for a little more dramatic weather to get my shots. Yeah.
I really loved the Fifth Avenue photograph of the hot dog stand and the smoke and the sun, just like having the perfect
winter light is great.
Yeah, there was a very landscape-like quality with like the composition of the buildings in the background, just sort of making this U, and then the mist is almost like mist rolling off of a mountain. It was super cool. So big fan.
Thanks.
And something else you said really resonated with me. There's that argument that people who are shutterbugs are not present enough, that they're always viewing life through a lens, but I've always felt differently. I've always sort of identified with your philosophy, where it helps me notice moments that I otherwise would take for granted.
Yeah. Well, I love, Richard Avedon famously said, "I hate cameras." And he was talking about just that. It's that this thing has to come up between you and the world that you're trying to communicate what's there, but you have to have this thing between you and what's happening. So, I leave, I'm quick. It's up and down. It's not always in front of my face. So, no, I think you walk through the world with greater awareness when you're thinking about making a picture. Yeah. I do anyway.
Well, it's that also, it's about that idea of making a picture as opposed to taking a picture, because these are very different things. A lot of the people are just using the camera to replicate something and to put a little box and bring it home. But the idea of making a picture is a very different, it's a simple 4-letter word, but it comes with a whole different level of intentionality to the process of bearing witness to the world, right?
Yeah.
Because at once you're trying to think, is there enough here to just put 4 corners around that says something, and you're feeling it, and you have to go on your instincts and then also your skills, and then you also do have to know what your prompts are. Why do you do this walk? Why are you doing this process? Who am I? Why am I following these types of people? All of that intentionality, I think, linked with your own life history and just an open heart too. There's nothing. My happiest part of the process, and I imagine it's similar for you, is being there, pressing the button. That's my favorite part of the whole thing, and there's every time I do that, I feel like I'm saying yes to something that's in front of me, and I'm validating it and saying this is worthy of bringing home and making last forever, even if it's not.
Right. And so often it's not, but it's like, I care about this. I care about, life is a gift. I care about people and my experience of other people, and I want to hang on to life. That's the yes. It's like, yes, you know, I want to hang on to this moment. It's this little way to stop time and hold it in your hands. And that's why photographing your own family is so important. I think, you know, so often I've wondered, is my most lasting work going to be that picture of the people that I love the most, you know? And that's a really powerful thing that photography gives everybody, you know, whether it's strangers or family, to make a photograph of loved ones that's more interesting than just, you know, a child, but that is your child or grandchild that you love in a picture that really lasts. I mean, that's every bit as valid, if, you know, look at the work that Harry Callahan did of his family, or Sally Mann, or, you know, it's art, but it's these are the people that they so loved. Beautiful. Yeah.
And we love our strangers too, though.
Yes, we do, because they're perfect strangers.
We are running short on time, but I think we have time enough for just a couple more. So here's a good one, but a tough one to answer for anyone in any discipline of art. Do you have some favorite photographers that you'd recommend?
Too many.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Gus and I will start with Joel Meyerowitz, because he's been a mentor and a friend to both of us, and has been really important to where we started and where we are. So we both owe him an incredible debt of gratitude. But, you know, everyone who does a book, who gives me an idea. I mean, there are so many influences. Harry Callahan was a very important early influence of mine. Edward Western, when I started in black and white, but, you know, now it's too much, as Gus would say, too many nouns and not enough verbs. I'm interested in more energy in a photo. It shifts over time. It's so hard to even begin. But Harry Callahan was early. Joel has been essential. Helen Levitt, I think, is extraordinary. And I always turn to her work, again, to kind of get that sense of, here's this woman doing it in this time when it really was almost all men. So that's just a few. Gus?
You know, it's a long list. All of those photographers are ones that I respect, and it goes in different ways at different times, you know? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think is actually really important, it depends where you are in your practice, but I'm really very interested in sort of cross-fertilization, you know?
Yeah.
Think about who has inspired you most, who's a musician, and then somehow go out with that in mind and try to make photographs that somehow are in alignment with that. Mm-hmm. Because to one degree, it gives you some lines in the sand, and on the other way, it kind of lets everything open up. So you're not sort of just replicating a very specific practice. But, you know, like any instrument, when you begin practicing, when you start to learn it, you know, first you do row, row, row the boat, and then you work your way to, you know, Stairway to Heaven, and you echo and you do these covers, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But then the real trick is to then get to play your own music. And sometimes, I mean, a real strategy that I've done, I've often, you know, my first book was inspired by the poetry of Frank O'Hara, you know, and somebody else who was a flaneur and walked the streets of Midtown while having a job and trying to see and feel things. And I think finding existing templates and heroes that are in other mediums can be a really useful way to both steal from them and find yourself at the same time.
Yeah. But any photographer who's ever done I mean, I have piles and piles and shelves.
Mostly from the Strand, right? Of course.
Of course. I live 3 blocks away. My favorite place, my favorite bookstore on earth, no doubt.
Well, that's why I was so you know, happy to do this. But I love the Rare Book Room upstairs. You know, where a lot of these events, you know, normally happen. It's a favorite place for me to meet. I'll often meet with people to look at book dummies and to talk about work, because we can look at their project on the chaise there, and then we can start pulling things from the shelf to get other ideas. You know, and it's such an incredible resource that way, and that tactile experience is so important. So
Yeah, and we've run into each other there. I mean, I just ran into a friend last week, masked, and I hadn't seen him in 9 months. So it's a venerable New York institution, and I'm lucky to live so close.
We would be in that room were it not for our current situation. It's a rough time to be a flaneur. That's for sure.
That it is.
Okay, final question of the evening. What is your advice for those who would like to eventually turn their work into a book?
Just keep making the pictures. If you love doing it, it's never going to feel like work. But keep making the pictures and print your pictures, print them out, look at them, start seeing things that work together. Let the themes start to announce themselves. I mean, if you're working in street photography, you have to let that happen a little bit. For me anyway. So I think do the work. It just pile up the pictures and start to find in your own voice where the book is.
And I agree with all of that. For me, it's essential that you turn it into a book, which I know sounds ridiculous, but the making of it into a physical object of any kind, and then try another kind. Every one of my books that I've done, I have a box of dummies and maquettes where I've changed the paper size, or I've found other books that I wanted to copy, and then I tried it that way, and then I tried it that way. And most of them were failures, but in every instance of getting out the paper and cutting it and using the glue stick and putting it into a space, and then you just do 16 pages and it's not right, you learn from all of that tactile experience. You're in dialogue with your own photographs. Mm-hmm. And by turning it into a physical object, literally making it into a book that you can now hand to a friend or mail to then get feedback on it. And you see it happen. They hold it and they look, and you see when they get bored, and you see when they get a little gasp, mm-hmm. and you learn from all of that experience. So literally that act of just turning, I mean, I have used Blurb and other mm-hmm. online platforms to do many book dummies. Then I cut it down and whatever, and it's so thrilling to get it back, and you flutter through it, and immediately you see what works and mostly what doesn't work. And then you do another one, and then you order another one, and then all of a sudden you have this massive stuff that will inform what's going to work, but also that you've learned from that experience. And it actually feels like an accomplishment to have that. And then the other thing I would say that is coupled with that is that you have to tell your story. It has to be your story. This is what we've talked about. Somebody could have taken all the pictures that Melissa's made these past few years and just done a love letter to New York. That actually could have been very compelling and successful in a specific way. But the book that Melissa put together is her story. It's her moment in time and space, just as much as it is in dialogue with New York in 2019 and mm-hmm. that space behind it. But you have to tell your story, and you have to have some skin in the game, and you have to often ultimately maybe reveal more about yourself than what you're actually looking at. And I think it's through that act of being vulnerable and revealing, the same way when you're out making these types of photographs, mm-hmm. the best ones I think come both from instinct and vulnerability. You have to find a way to be a part of the books as well, I think. So
yeah, it really, putting work out there, even if it's a Blurb book or a handmade, our Allison McCauley, one of our colleagues at Up, makes these beautiful handmade books. She tears the paper and lovingly does this, but it's. I think if you want to make a book, you got to love the book. You've got to think about it as an object and not your pictures on a screen. Print your work as best you can. Look at it, hold it, and it will start to teach you things that you didn't know before. So it did me. It certainly did me.
Nice. That is all really, really excellent advice. Melissa, Gus, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us tonight. And to everyone at home, thank you for tuning in. We do apologize again if you had any tech difficulties, but once more, you can use the same link and password to watch the replay of the event once we conclude here. But most importantly, we have shared a link in the chat if you would like to purchase a copy of Perfect Strangers. There's also a green button in the middle bottom of your screen if you'd like to do so. Any final words from the talent this evening?
Yeah, please. I'd love to just thank everyone who's here for giving us an hour of your time to listen to us talk about this. If you buy the book or go look at the book, I'm honored. And many of you are friends, and some of you are perfect strangers. So, and thank you to the Strand. It is such an incredible place in New York City, and I feel really honored to be doing this with you. I'm humbled. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely our pleasure. All right. Thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so much. Thank you. So grateful to be here. Thank you
Hope
for
you
everybody
enjoyed
coming.
it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.